Hey guys, David Pingree here with another Dialed In. This time we've got our 2020 Husqvarna 350 out here at Milestone today, and our friend Cody Young doing the test riding for us. We'll start with some suspension on this thing if you've got a 350. The notes from Husky, this thing comes, the standard air pressure is 10.4 bar, compression and rebound both 12 clicks out. So what they recommend, if the front end feels harsh or kind of divey, you want to bump up the bar to 10.6 or even 10.8 and slow the rebound down a few clicks. That was kind of my preference. I went up to 10.8 and slowed down 2 clicks in the front to get that front raised up where I wanted it and kind of slowed down. But that's a little bit personal preference, as we're going to hear from Cody, because he went a little bit different direction. The stock setting in the shock, they want 105 millimeters of sag. That's what Husqvarna recommends. High speed compression, 1.5 turns out, low speed at 15 clicks out, and rebound at 15 clicks out. If it feels unbalanced or high in the rear, try taking out a half a turn on that high speed and slowing the rebound down a couple clicks. That's what Husky recommends. For me, when I rode this bike, again, like I said, I went up to 10.8 bar on that fork and slowed the rebound down a little bit, and I was happy. I think I softened the shock 2 clicks. That was it. I didn't touch the high speed, and that was it. I was pretty stoked with it. So, but that was my impression. Today we got Cody doing this. Thanks for coming out and helping with us. What was your kind of feeling on the fork, and what direction did you go there?
The fork felt pretty good. In the beginning, it felt a little springy to me and a little bit stiff. And so I softened up the compression a couple clicks on top, and I sped the rebound up a little bit just to kind of absorb that when I went softer on top to help kind of counteract for the bottom. So for me, it felt like it worked better, and I went with the shock, I went a couple clicks softer and a couple clicks slower on the rebound, just to kind of even out for what I did on the forks. And for me, it felt really good. I was really happy with it, and it felt really plush, and the way my ride style is, it worked for me good. And
there's more than one ways to skin that cat, right? Like, he could have tried dropping down the bar, you know, the air pressure in that fork to make it feel softer. Instead, he went with clickers and then used the rebound to compensate for what he was doing there. So there's different ways to get to where you want to go. If you ended up happy with it, then cool. But again, if you're remembering this air fork, if it feels like if it's front end down, then add some air pressure. Or if it's too tall and you feel like you're choppered out always, drop that air pressure down a little bit and find a balance with the air pressure to start with. And then once it's balanced, then you can work on how it's absorbing the bumps, if it's too stiff, too soft, and rebound as well. So you were pretty comfortable with the suspension after you made those changes?
Yeah, I mean, it felt pretty good. I mean, for me, first time riding a 350, it was definitely a new experience for me, but I was very happy with it. And with the suspension a little bit, because each motor, 250, 450, 350, you kind of suspension acts a little different with power. So for me, I got the suspension work pretty good, and I was happy with it.
And for those who may be buying a 350 for the first time, we talked a little bit about this. You've ridden the 250s and 450s. It was your first time really getting on one of these, and it's its own animal, right?
Yeah, it's definitely its own animal. It's very, very fun to ride for someone out there that it wants a little more than 250F and wants a little less than a 450. I mean, the power on this thing is unbelievable. We mess with the maps, 1 and 2 map with the traction control, and mess around with all that stuff. And I mean, if you're looking for something a little more than 250F with some smooth power, that #1 map on this thing is unbelievable. And for me, for my riding style, I like the #2 because it's more aggressive, but I ride it more up a couple gears, lugging it. And so for me, that aggressive power, but for me, smoothing it out with throttle control has worked perfect for me.
So by going to the #1 map is the standard map, 2 is aggressive. So Cody went to the aggressive map, but then just kind of rode a taller gear, and that aggressive map allowed him to pull those taller gears, which is actually the way you want to ride these. You don't want to over rev them. Obviously, that affects the handling. So overall, once you found that map, you said you also messed with traction control. Tell me what your thoughts were there.
The traction control today was the first time I ever messed with one, ever kind of played around with it. In some sections it worked really good and I liked it. In some sections it just, with my riding style, I ride it up a gear, lugging it a little more, it kind of almost felt like I was dragging the brake, which I could feel that traction control activating. But for me, I ran it with and without, and for my riding style I prefer without it, that's just my riding style I like to have that aggressive power but really mellow on the throttle with it.
Yeah, and the traction control, something I noticed, if you were at, say, Glen Helen in the afternoon, or a track that's minimal traction, or it's got spots that go from good traction to hard slick, or where the traction goes away, that's where that thing really shines. Here at Milestone today, we had pretty good grip everywhere, and so that traction control is not as functional. You said it kind of felt like you were dragging the brakes coming out of some turns, which I thought was interesting, an interesting take on it. So I've noticed I love it anytime there's those, like a Glen Helen, where you go from a nice berm to all of a sudden it's really hard and slick base underneath. It helps you to sort of modulate that power as you're coming out. Anything else that you adjusted or changed on the bike?
I just adjusted throttle play, but I mean, that's just personal preference for bike setup. But other than that, I mean, I didn't touch the bars, didn't touch the levers. I mean, everything else on the bike was perfect. I didn't just really just the suspension clickers, and that was really about it. I mean, the bike, I love it. It felt really good.
How about gearing? Any changes you might make there, up or down?
If it was my personal bike, I would probably go up, probably a tooth on the rear, just to kind of shorten those gears, just because I like my gears a little closer, because I do ride it up a gear, so it kind of closens them up for me. But I mean, for an average everyday guy that just wants to go ride and have fun and not really too picky on it, the stock gearing on it was really, really great.
Yeah, that might help you maybe pull second gear starts a little better, or if you had big hills, be able to pull that next gear a bit.
Yeah.
These bikes, one thing about these Husqvarnas and its KTM counterparts, they rev to the moon. So you can go up a gear and get away with it because the thing over revs so far. It's not like you run out of motor and fall off. So something to think about if you're kind of find yourself in between gears, go up one. Something I think a lot of people do jump to. So that's really it. Again, when I rode this, the time I put on it, those were the changes I made to suspension. I flirted with all the maps, and that's all track dependent. You just got to take the time to get used to those and learn what they do, so that when you get to a certain track, you can go, you know what, this is a good track, you know, map 2 track, or man, I need to get the traction control on. You really just got to get comfortable using it. And don't forget to bring a shock pump to the track. I will say that. These things, that's the one downside. I say one downside. It's a downside to air forks is the pressure will change sitting in your garage. So don't just assume because you said it the last time you went riding that it's still that way. This thing, they'll drop, you know, a significant amount over the matter of a couple of days if your temperature drops, if you go up or down in elevation. So you're gonna have to have a shock pump with you and check this thing every time you ride. That's the downside to an air fork. The upside is you can change spring rates right here at the track. So it does give you a lot of flexibility that way. So big thanks to Cody for coming out and helping us ride this thing. You guys are going to enjoy your Husqvarna 350. It's an awesome bike. They're available at your dealers right now. Go check out the 2020 350s.